Hello, everyone. My name's Tom, and at 22, I thought I was too old for home alone horror stories. Boy, was I wrong. This wasn't some campfire tale. This was real, and it happened just last week. It started innocently enough. My parents were out of town for their anniversary, a week-long cruise to the Caribbean. I had the whole house to myself. Freedom, right? No nagging, no curfew, just endless video games and late-night snacks. The first few days were glorious. I practically lived in my pajamas, ordered way too much pizza, and binged every series I'd ever wanted to watch. The old house, usually bustling with life, felt like my personal kingdom. But then things started to shift. Subtle at first, easily dismissed. I'd be in the living room scrolling through my phone and catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision in the hallway. Just a shadow, I'd tell myself, a trick of the light. The house was old, full of nooks and crannies, and the ancient wiring sometimes caused the lights to dim or flicker. Nothing to worry about. Then came the sounds. Low, indistinct murmurs like someone whispering just outside a closed door. I'd pause my game, pull off my headphones, and listen. Silence. Utter, complete silence, save for the hum of the refrigerator or the drip of rain. I'd shake my head, convinced I was just hearing things, my mind playing tricks on me because of all the horror movies I'd been watching. But the whispers, they started to feel more deliberate, more frequent. One evening I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich. The radio was on, playing some upbeat pop song. I was humming along, buttering bread, when the song suddenly cut out. The radio wasn't unplugged. It was still on, but there was no sound. Just static, faint and hissing. I frowned, tried changing the station, but nothing. Then through the static, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible thump. It sounded like it came from upstairs, from my parents' bedroom. My heart gave a little jolt. I stood still, sandwich forgotten, straining my ears. The static continued, an unsettling blanket of white noise. Then another thump. Louder this time, more distinct. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding weak and thin in the sudden silence. "Mom, Dad." Stupid, I know. They were thousands of miles away. But a part of me, a very primal part, hoped it was them back early, surprising me. Of course, there was no reply. I grabbed the heaviest skillet I could find, my hand shaking slightly, and slowly made my way out of the kitchen. The static from the radio was like a heartbeat in the background, a constant reminder that something was off. The stairs seemed to stretch endlessly before me, each step creaking ominously under my weight. I reached the landing, my eyes scanning the darkened hallway. The only light came from the sliver under my parents' bedroom door. My breath hitched. I knew I hadn't left their lights on. They were meticulous about saving energy. Pushing down the rising tide of fear, I crept closer, skillet held high. I reached the door, my ear pressed against the cool wood. Nothing. No sounds, no whispers, just the pounding of my own blood in my ears. I slowly, carefully turned the doorknob. It clicked, a surprisingly loud sound in the silence, and the door swung inward. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn, and the only light came from the streetlights outside, casting long, eerie shadows. Nothing seemed to be out of place. The bed was made, the furniture undisturbed. I even checked the closet, half expecting some intruder to jump out at me. Empty. "Just your imagination, Tom," I muttered to myself, trying to sound reassuring. It didn't work. As I turned to leave, my gaze fell upon the dresser. On top of it, usually impeccably organized, lay a small, antique music box. It was my grandmother's, a delicate thing of polished wood and intricate carvings, and it was always kept in a locked drawer. Always. But there it was, sitting out in the open, and the lid was slightly ajar. A chill snaked its way down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. I knew with a certainty that made my stomach churn that I hadn't touched that music box. My parents certainly hadn't. I cautiously approached the dresser, my eyes darting around the room. As I reached for the music box, the lid slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to close. Not slam shut, not snap, just a slow, deliberate creak as it lowered itself. I yanked my hand back, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. I didn't wait. I turned and practically sprinted down the stairs, skillet still clutched in my hand, my mind screaming at me to get out, get out, get out. I locked myself in the living room, huddled on the couch, the lights blazing. I tried to rationalize it. The old house settling, a draft, anything but what my gut was screaming. But the image of that music box closing on its own was seared into my brain. The next few days were a blur of nervous exhaustion. I avoided the upstairs, slept with all the lights on downstairs, and blasted music to drown out any imagined sounds. I called my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. How do you explain a ghost to your rational, science-minded parents over a crackly international call? Then came the cold, a bone-chilling cold that seemed to emanate from specific spots in the house. I'd walk into the hallway, and a pocket of air would be noticeably colder than the rest of the house, like walking through a freezer door. It wasn't drafts. I'd checked the windows, sealed them. This was different. This was a palpable, oppressive cold that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. One afternoon, I was trying to distract myself by playing my guitar in the living room. The sun was streaming through the windows, making the room feel bright and cheerful, and I almost managed to forget the growing sense of dread. I was in the middle of a particularly complicated chord progression when I heard it, a faint, almost melodic hum. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the house. I stopped playing, my fingers freezing on the fretboard. The hum continued, gentle and mournful like a lullaby sung by someone on the verge of tears. It was beautiful, yet utterly terrifying. It seemed to float through the air, moving from the dining room towards the kitchen. Slowly, carefully, I put my guitar down. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew that sound. It was the music box. But how? I had left it upstairs, closed, hoping that by ignoring it, whatever was behind it would just go away. The humming grew louder, more distinct, as if whatever was making the sound was getting closer. It was definitely coming from the music box, that fragile, antique melody now filling the house. It was a tune I remembered my grandmother often playing. A sad, sweet melody that now felt infused with something profoundly unsettling. I slowly stood up, my eyes glued to the archway leading to the dining room. I could hear the distinct whirring and tinkling of the music box as it played. It was no longer a faint hum. It was a full-blown performance. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I took a step towards the dining room. Then another. The music was now so clear, so vibrant, it felt like the box was right there. I peered around the doorframe into the dining room. The room was empty. My eyes darted around, searching for the source. The music continued, seemingly coming from all directions at once, echoing off the walls. Then I saw it. On the antique sideboard, where it never was, sat the music box. The lid was fully open, and the tiny ballerina inside was slowly pirouetting, her painted smile fixed in an unsettling grin. But that wasn't what made me gasp. Around the music box, the air shimmered almost like heat haze, but it was freezing. And in the center of that shimmering, a faint, translucent outline was forming. It was vague, indistinct, like looking through frosted glass, but it was there. The shape of a small, hunched figure. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a trick of the light, not a shadow. This was something else. This was a presence. The music box played its mournful tune, and the figure seemed to sway gently to the rhythm. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt an intense, overwhelming sorrow radiating from it, a profound sadness that seemed to seep into my very bones. I wanted to run, to scream, to shatter the music box into 1,000 pieces, but I was frozen, rooted to the spot by a horrifying fascination. The figure became slightly more defined, the outline a little sharper. I could almost see the wisps of hair, the faint suggestion of a dress. It was small, like a child. Then the music box stopped. Abruptly, the ballerina froze mid-pirouette. The shimmering air around the figure vanished and the cold receded slightly. The figure remained, still indistinct, but its presence felt heavier, more oppressive. And then I heard it, a faint, childish whisper right next to my ear. "Why did you stop?" I shrieked, a raw, terrified sound that tore through the silence of the house. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, and landed hard on the living room floor. My eyes were still fixed on the dining room, but the figure was gone. The music box sat silently on the sideboard, lid open, ballerina frozen. The room was empty. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. I didn't care about my clothes, my phone, nothing, just out. I tore through the living room, fumbling with the deadbolt on the front door. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely grasp the lock. Finally, with a click, it opened. I burst out into the pouring rain, not even bothering to close the door behind me. I ran blindly through the storm, the icy rain soaking me to the bone. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the house, away from the cold, away from the whispers and the mournful music. I ended up at my best friend Mike's house, a few blocks away. I pounded on his door, soaked and shivering, looking like a drowned rat. He was shocked when he opened the door, but when he saw the sheer terror in my eyes, he didn't ask questions. He just pulled me inside, wrapped me in a blanket, and made me a hot chocolate. It took me hours to calm down enough to speak, to coherently explain what had happened. He listened patiently, his usual joking demeanor replaced with a somber concern. He didn't dismiss me, didn't tell me I was crazy. He just listened. The next day, with Mike accompanying me, I went back to the house. The rain had stopped and the sun was shining, making the old Victorian look almost cheerful. But the cheerfulness felt like a lie. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every creak of the floorboards a warning. We found the front door ajar just as I'd left it. Inside, everything seemed normal. The living room was exactly as I'd left it, my guitar still on the floor where I dropped it. The dining room was also untouched. The music box was still on the sideboard, lid open, ballerina poised. Mike, being the more practical one, carefully picked up the music box. He examined it, turned it over, tried to wind it. "It's not broken," he said, handing it back to me. "But it's not playing now." I just stared at it, a cold dread washing over me again. It was just a music box, a beautiful, innocent object that now held a profound terror for me. We spent the rest of the day going through the house, room by room, trying to find any explanation, any logical reason for what I had experienced. We found nothing. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no hidden speakers. The house was empty, just us, and maybe something else. Mike tried to convince me to stay at his place until my parents returned, but I knew I couldn't. I had to face it, whatever it was. I had to understand. That night I didn't sleep in the living room. I went to my own bedroom, turned on every light and sat on my bed, staring at the closed door. I kept the music box on my bedside table, hoping that if I kept it close, I could somehow control it, or at least be prepared. Hours passed. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. The silence pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. My eyes kept darting to the music box, waiting, dreading. Around 3 a.m., just when I was starting to drift off, I heard it again. The faint, mournful hum. My eyes snapped open. The music box. It was playing. Not just humming, but fully playing its sad, sweet melody right there on my bedside table. I slowly turned my head. The lid was open, the ballerina twirling, and next to it the air shimmered. The cold returned, even more intense than before, making my breath fog in the air. And the figure was there, more distinct this time, still translucent but clearer. A small girl, no older than 7 or 8, with long, dark hair that seemed to float around her head. She was wearing a simple white dress, old-fashioned, almost like a nightgown. Her eyes, or where her eyes should be, were hollow, dark pits that seemed to stare directly into my soul. And she was crying. Silent tears seemed to stream down her translucent cheeks, catching the light in a ghostly shimmer. My heart was in my throat, a frantic thump against my Adam's apple. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was paralyzed by a fear so profound it bordered on reverence. The music box continued its lullaby, and the girl slowly, painstakingly, lifted a spectral hand. Her finger, thin and translucent, reached out towards the music box. She traced the delicate carvings on its wooden surface, her touch seeming to cause faint ripples in the air. "She took it," the little girl whispered, her voice a fragile, sorrowful sound that echoed in the cold room. "She took my song." My mind reeled. Who took what? I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper. The girl turned her hollow gaze towards me, and a fresh wave of sorrow washed over me, a feeling of immense loss and betrayal. "The lady," she whispered, her voice laced with pain. "The lady with the red hair, she stole my song. She took my music box." My grandmother had red hair, and she had cherished this music box, often playing it for me when I was a child, telling me it had been passed down through generations. "This was your music box?" I asked, my voice trembling. The girl nodded slowly, her ghostly tears still flowing. "My mommy gave it to me for my 7th birthday. I loved it. I played it every day." She gestured vaguely towards the window. I would sit by the window and play, and Mommy would sing along. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. What happened? The girl's form seemed to flicker, her outline becoming even more vague for a moment, as if she were struggling to hold onto her presence. "The fire," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The fire came. Mommy told me to hide in the closet. She said she would come back for me, but she didn't." My blood ran cold. The fire. I remembered hearing stories about a fire years and years ago that had ravaged a house in this very spot. A small child had died in it. My family had bought the lot years later, building our Victorian on the old foundation. "And my music box," the girl continued, her voice growing stronger, a hint of anger now mingling with her sorrow. "The lady with the red hair, she came after the fire. She found my music box, and she took it. She took my song." "My grandmother," I said, a wave of understanding washing over me. "She must have found it in the ruins. She didn't know." The girl's gaze intensified, those hollow eyes seeming to bore into me. "She took my song. I want my song back." The music box played on, the melody now sounding less mournful and more insistent. The cold in the room was unbearable, and I could see my own breath. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The girl slowly extended her hand towards the music box. "Give it back," she whispered. "Give me back my song." I reached for the music box, my fingers trembling. The wood felt icy cold, almost burning to the touch. As I picked it up, the music stopped. The ballerina froze. The girl's eyes, those hollow, dark pits, were fixed on me. "Give it back," she repeated, her voice a little louder now, a hint of command in it. I knew what she meant. She didn't want the physical box. She wanted the connection, the music, the memory that was tied to it. With shaking hands, I held the music box out to her. Her translucent fingers brushed against mine, sending a jolt of icy energy through my arm. The music box felt like it vibrated in my grasp. As her fingers closed around it, the music box glowed with a soft, ethereal light. The little girl's form began to solidify, her features becoming clearer, almost human. The hollow eyes filled with a glimmer of light, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. The music box began to play again, a little louder, a little brighter than before. And as it played, the girl's face softened. A faint, ethereal smile touched her lips. The tears on her cheeks were gone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice sounding clearer, less sorrowful. "Thank you for my song." And then, as the last notes of the music box faded, she began to shimmer, not with cold, but with light. She became translucent again, then faded slowly, beautifully, until she was gone. The cold in the room vanished, replaced by a sudden warmth. The music box, now back in my hand, felt just like ordinary wood. I sat there for a long time, clutching the music box, the silence of the room now feeling peaceful, not oppressive. The rising sun cast a soft glow through my window, painting the room in hues of orange and pink. When my parents returned a few days later, I didn't tell them the whole story. How could I? But I did tell them about the music box and how I felt it should be returned to the earth, to where it truly belonged. They looked at me strangely, but agreed, seeing the earnestness in my eyes. We went to the backyard, to the spot where the old house had stood, where the little girl's life had ended. I dug a small hole, carefully placed the music box inside, and covered it with earth. As I did, a sense of peace settled over me, a profound quiet that I hadn't felt in weeks. I still live in that house, and sometimes on a quiet night when the wind howls and the rain lashes against the windows, I think I hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible hum, a ghost of a lullaby carried on the breeze. But it doesn't scare me anymore. It's a peaceful sound now, a little girl's song, finally returned. Story the end. Story number 2. CHLOE. It was just a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. The days kind of blur together when you're 17 and your biggest problem is usually whether you aced your chemistry quiz. But this Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it was, it became the day. The day everything changed. The day I learned that sometimes being alone is the scariest thing in the world. My parents, bless their hearts, they were always pretty trusting. A little too trusting, maybe. They had this annual conference, a thing for my dad's accounting firm, and every year they'd go for 3 days, leaving me with strict instructions about not burning the house down and maybe, just maybe, not throwing a raging party, as if I was the party type. I was more of a Netflix and pizza in my pajamas kind of girl, which honestly was my plan for this particular solo stint. Mom, ever the worrier, had a whole checklist. Did you lock the back door, sweetie? Did you remember to set the alarm? The outdoor lights are on a timer, but double check them, okay? Don't forget to call your aunt if you need anything at all, even just to talk. Dad, he was more practical. There's a 20 in the cookie jar, use it wisely. Don't order too much takeout. They hugged me, told me they loved me. And then their minivan pulled out of the driveway, the sound of the engine fatting into the quiet suburban evening. That first night was glorious, absolute freedom. I cranked up my music, danced around the living room like a lunatic, ordered an extra-large pepperoni, and binged 3 episodes of my current obsession. It was exactly what I'd envisioned. Peaceful, solitary, perfect. I even took a bubble bath, something I rarely did when my parents were home because my dad always complained about the water bill. I went to bed feeling completely content. The house, usually bustling, felt expansive and silent, a good kind of silent, the kind that lets you hear your own thoughts. I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of I don't even remember, probably something mundane like acing that chemistry quiz. The next morning I woke up late, a delicious lie-in. The sun was streaming through my window and the house still felt normal. I made myself some elaborate pancakes, the kind with chocolate chips and whipped cream, because who was going to judge me? I spent the day reading, playing video games, and generally reveling in my temporary autonomy. As evening approached, a subtle shift occurred. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the light inside the house took on a different quality. Shadows deepened in the corners of rooms, and the familiar creaks and groans of an old house seemed more pronounced. Our house wasn't ancient, built in the 70s, but it had its quirks. The settling sounds, the occasional pop of the heating system, the wind whistling through the eaves, things I usually didn't even notice. I decided to watch a scary movie. You know, to really embrace the Home Alone vibe. It was some slasher flick, full of jump scares and a ridiculously attractive final girl. I had the volume up, the lights off, and a bowl of popcorn in my lap. I was totally engrossed. Then, during a particularly tense scene, I heard it. A faint scratching sound. It seemed to come from downstairs. My heart gave a little lurch, but I immediately rationalized it. Probably the cat. We had an indoor-outdoor cat, Mittens, and she was always getting into mischief. Maybe she'd found her way into the pantry and was trying to claw her way out. Or maybe it was just the house settling, amplified by the silence and the movie. I paused the movie, the eerie soundtrack suddenly cut off, leaving an unsettling quiet. I strained my ears. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. I probably imagined it. My imagination was always a bit overactive, especially when watching horror movies alone. I unpaused the movie, trying to get back into the suspense, but a knot of unease had formed in my stomach. A few minutes later, there it was again. Scratch, scratch, scrape. This time it was clearer. Definitely not the cat. Mittens had a distinctive meow when she was in distress, and this wasn't it. This was rhythmic, almost deliberate, and it sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. I muted the TV completely. The silence was deafening now, filled only with the frantic beating of my own heart. I slowly stood up from the couch, my eyes darting around the living room, as if expecting something to materialize in the shadows. "Hello," I called out, my voice a little shaky. It sounded ridiculously small in the vast quiet of the house. No response. Of course not. What was I expecting a ghost to answer? Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the closest thing to a weapon I could find, a decorative brass letter opener from the coffee table. It was heavy and surprisingly sharp at the tip. Not exactly a sword, but it made me feel marginally less vulnerable. I crept towards the kitchen, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Each step felt like an eternity. The kitchen was dark, only illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the window above the sink. I flicked on the light switch. The sudden brightness made me jump. Everything looked normal. The dishes were in the sink from my pancake feast. A box of cereal sat on the counter. A forgotten banana peel in the trash. Nothing was out of place. No cat in distress. No open pantry door. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the source of the sound. Then I saw it. On the back door, the small, rectangular pet door that Mittens used to go in and out. It was moving, just slightly, like something was pushing against it from the outside. My blood ran cold. I knew logically it could still be Mittens. Maybe she was having trouble getting in, but the scratching I'd heard, it hadn't sounded like a cat's claws. It had sounded tougher, more insistent. My hand trembled as I reached for the lock on the back door. We had a deadbolt, a regular lock, and a chain. All were engaged, but the pet door, it was just a plastic flap held in place by magnets. Easy to push open. Too easy. I pressed my ear against the door, holding my breath. I heard it again. A soft, continuous scrape, and then something else. A faint whisper. It was indistinct, muffled by the door, but it was there, like someone was talking just on the other side. Panic began to rise in my throat. This wasn't Mittens. This wasn't the house settling. Someone was outside, and they were trying to get in. My mind raced. What did I do? Call the police? My parents? But what would I even say? There's a whisper and a scratching sound at my pet door. They'd think I was crazy or just overreacting to a raccoon. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my ears. I needed to see. I needed to know. I tiptoed to the window above the sink, carefully peering through a gap in the blinds. The backyard was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the motion sensor light on the far side of the garage, which wasn't currently on. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows from the trees. I scanned the area near the back door. Nothing. Just the familiar expanse of our lawn. The swing set my dad had built when I was little. The overgrown rose bushes. No one was there. I must have imagined it. The whispering, the scratching. My mind was playing tricks on me. That slasher movie, it was messing with my head. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a flush of embarrassment. I was being ridiculous. I went back to the living room, picked up the remote, and unpaused the movie. But the tension I'd felt earlier was now replaced by a persistent, gnawing fear. I couldn't focus on the movie. Every little sound made me jump. I decided to just go to bed. Maybe a good night's sleep would reset my brain. I locked all the windows and doors on the ground floor again, just to be sure, and then I went upstairs. My bedroom felt like a sanctuary. I climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I had my phone, a book, and my headphones. I put on some calming music, hoping it would drown out the residual anxiety. I must have drifted off because I suddenly woke with a jolt. The music was still playing, but something had penetrated my sleep. A sound, not from downstairs this time, from inside the house. A floorboard creaked, right outside my bedroom door. My eyes flew open. My heart slammed against my ribs. I held my breath, straining to hear. Was it just the house? Could it be a gust of wind? Then I heard it again. A soft, distinct shuffle, followed by another creak, closer this time. Someone was in the hallway. My blood ran cold. My entire body went rigid. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. I stared at my bedroom door, my eyes wide with terror. It was a solid wooden door, but it felt impossibly thin, a flimsy barrier between me and whatever was out there. I heard another shuffle, then a soft, rhythmic thump, like something was being dragged. Tears welled in my eyes. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't my imagination. This was real. There was someone in my house. My phone was on my nightstand within reach. I needed to call for help. But the thought of making a sound, of alerting whoever was out there to the fact that I was awake, was terrifying. What if they heard me? What if they came in? I painstakingly slowly reached for my phone. My hand trembled so violently I almost dropped it. I fumbled to unlock it, my fingers slick with sweat. I pulled up my recent calls. Mom, Dad, Aunt Carol. Who did I call first? My parents were miles away. Aunt Carol lived 20 minutes away. The police? Should I just call 911? Before I could decide, the doorknob began to turn. Slowly, silently, my breath hitched in my throat. My eyes were fixated on that brass knob, watching it rotate, millimeter by agonizing millimeter. It was like something out of a nightmare. I squeezed my eyes shut. A silent scream caught in my chest. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to be anywhere but there, in that bed, waiting for the door to open. The door creaked inward, just a sliver at first. Then slowly it swung open. A dark shape stood in the doorway, tall, impossibly thin. Silhouetted against the faint light from the hallway, I couldn't make out any features, just a formless, menacing presence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by a terror so profound, it felt like my soul was being ripped from my body. The shape took a step forward, then another. It was coming into my room. My heart was a frantic drum solo in my chest. I felt like I was going to pass out. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this wasn't a dream. This was happening. Then a low, guttural growl emanated from the darkness. It wasn't human. It was something animalistic, primal, full of menace. That's when I finally found my voice. A raw, piercing scream ripped from my lungs, echoing through the silent house. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing the lamp from my nightstand. It was heavy, porcelain. Not much, but it was all I had. I swung it wildly, blindly towards the dark shape. There was a sharp crack, a yelp not human, more like an animal but larger, and then a flurry of movement. The shape recoiled, stumbling backwards. I didn't wait. My legs, suddenly alive, propelled me towards the door. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get out. I barreled past the doorway, down the hall, and skidded down the stairs. The house was a blur of shadows and terror. I fumbled with the locks on the front door, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely grip the deadbolt. My mind was screaming, "Get out, get out, get out." Finally, the locks clicked open. I wrenched the door open and burst out into the night, not even bothering to close it behind me. I ran. I ran down the porch steps, across the lawn and down the street, my bare feet slapping against the cold pavement. I didn't stop until I reached Mrs. Henderson's house, 3 doors down. She was an elderly woman, always up late watching TV. I pounded on her door, screaming and sobbing, my voice raw. Mrs. Henderson, bless her cotton socks, eventually opened the door, her face a mask of confusion and then concern. She pulled me inside, wrapped me in a blanket, and called 911. The police arrived quickly. 2 cruisers, flashing blue and red lights painting our quiet street in an eerie glow. I was still shaking uncontrollably, trying to explain through tears what had happened. They went into our house, flashlights beaming into every corner. They found nothing. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, nothing missing, just a broken lamp on my bedroom floor, and a small, dark stain on the rug near the doorway. Too small to be human blood, more like animal blood. They searched the entire house, the backyard, the perimeter. Nothing, no intruder, no evidence. The officers, kindly but firm, suggested it might have been an animal. A raccoon, perhaps, that had gotten in through the pet door and somehow made its way upstairs. They explained that raccoons could be aggressive, and if cornered, they might growl and try to defend themselves. A raccoon. My mind tried to grasp that explanation, to cling to it like a lifeline. A raccoon that turned a doorknob. A raccoon that shuffled and dragged something. A raccoon that was tall and impossibly thin. I didn't believe them, not really. But what else could I say? I sounded hysterical. I sounded like a crazy kid who watched too many scary movies. My parents were called and they rushed home, frantic with worry. They found me huddled on Mrs. Henderson's couch, still shaking, still crying. They hugged me, held me, tried to soothe me. They believed me, or at least they tried to. We stayed at a hotel that night. I didn't sleep. Every shadow, every sound, every creak made me jump. The next day, my dad boarded up the pet door, permanently. He also installed a new, heavier deadbolt on my bedroom door, for my peace of mind, he said. But my peace of mind was shattered, irrevocably. I still live in that house. My parents never sold it. They renovated parts of it, tried to make me feel safer. But every night when the lights go out, I hear it. The creaks, the groans, the wind whistling through the eaves. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the house is absolutely silent, I swear I hear it. A faint scratching, a soft shuffle, and a low, guttural growl that sends shivers down my spine. I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know it wasn't a raccoon. It was something else, something darker, something that shouldn't have been there, something that had been waiting. And sometimes when I'm home alone and the shadows grow long, I can still feel its presence, watching, waiting. Chloe shivers, her eyes wide and distant. She takes a shaky sip of her cocoa, then stares out into the darkness beyond the spotlight. Story the end. Story number 3. My name is Sarah, 32, and my husband, Mark, 34, thought it was a steal. A charming, albeit slightly neglected Victorian with character. Character, he'd said, running his hand over the dusty banister, and potential. I just saw the dust, the creaking floorboards, and a subtle chill that no amount of heating could truly dispel. It started subtly, as these things often do. A whisper in the empty hallway when I was alone, a fleeting shadow darting across my peripheral vision. I'd blame it on my imagination, the stress of unpacking, the unfamiliar sounds of an old house. Mark, ever the pragmatist, would nod, offering a reassuring hug. Just the wind, honey, he'd say, his voice a warm anchor in the growing unease. Then came the cold spots, not just the general chill of the house, but pockets of icy air that would spontaneously appear, lingering for a moment before dissipating. They were always accompanied by a strange pressure, a feeling of being watched. One evening, as I was making dinner, a wave of intense cold washed over me in the kitchen. The air grew heavy, and I could have sworn I felt a breath on my neck, even though I was alone. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing. Just the flickering overhead light and the hum of the refrigerator. Mark started to notice things too, though he was slower to admit it. His tools would go missing from his workshop in the basement, only to reappear in odd places. The kitchen counter, tucked beneath a pillow in our bedroom. He'd grumble about his own forgetfulness, but I saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes. He was a meticulous man. Misplaced tools were not his style. The dreams began next. Vivid, unsettling dreams that left me breathless and disoriented upon waking. I saw glimpses of a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, with long dark hair and an old-fashioned white dress. She was always sad, always looking at me with wide, pleading eyes. I'd wake up convinced I'd heard her crying, a soft, mournful sound that echoed in the quiet house. One morning, I came downstairs to find all the kitchen cabinet doors wide open, every single one. The pantry door was ajar too, a box of cereal half spilled on the floor. Mark had already left for work. I stood there staring at the chaos, a prickle of fear running down my spine. This wasn't Mark's doing, and it certainly wasn't mine. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The only response was the deep silence of the house, a silence that felt heavy and watchful. I started researching the house's history online. It was a beautiful old place built in the late 1800s. The records were sparse, but I did find an old newspaper clipping, a tragedy. In 1912, a fire had swept through the upper floor, claiming the life of a young girl named Eleanor Vance, just 7 years old. The description of her was eerily similar to the girl in my dreams. My blood ran cold. I didn't tell Mark about Alina right away. He would dismiss it, I knew. He'd attribute it to my overactive imagination. But the presence in the house was becoming undeniable. We started hearing footsteps above us when no one was upstairs. The rocking chair in the nursery, a room we hadn't even begun to decorate yet, would sometimes be found gently swaying. One evening, Mark and I were watching TV in the living room. Suddenly, the antique music box on the mantelpiece, a piece we'd inherited from my grandmother and hadn't touched since moving in, began to play. A tinny, melancholic tune filled the room. Mark and I froze, staring at it. Did you wind that up?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He shook his head, his face pale. "No, I haven't even touched it." We watched in stunned silence as the music box played itself out, the tiny ballerina figurine inside twirling slowly. When it stopped, the silence that followed was even more profound, more menacing. That night I woke up to a chilling sensation. It felt like someone was sitting on the edge of our bed. The mattress dipped slightly, and I felt a faint pressure on my leg. I lay absolutely still, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could feel a cold breath on my face, and then a child's soft whisper right next to my ear. "Mommy." I screamed. Mark jolted awake, fumbling for the lamp switch. The room flooded with light, revealing nothing. The mattress was level, the air still. "What is it, Sarah? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep and concern. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. "She's here, Mark, the little girl. She called me Mommy." That was the turning point for Mark. He couldn't deny it anymore. The fear in my eyes, the genuine terror, finally broke through his skepticism. We spent the next few days in a state of heightened anxiety. We tried to talk ourselves out of it, to find logical explanations, but there were none. One afternoon, I was sorting through some old boxes in the attic. The air up there was thick with dust and the scent of aged wood. I found a small wooden chest tucked away in a corner. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed lace and dried flowers, was a worn leather-bound diary. It belonged to Alina Vance's mother. Anna Vance died 1912, age 28. I started reading, my hands trembling. Anna wrote about her beautiful daughter, Alina, her joyful spirit, her love for music and dancing. She described the fire the day it happened in agonizing detail. How quickly it spread, how she tried to get to Alina, but the flames were too fierce. She blamed herself, consumed by grief and guilt. But then, a few entries later, something darker emerged. Anna wrote about the cold, about her presence, about Alina's sadness. She believed Alina was still in the house, trapped, longing for her mother. She spoke of Alina's little games, the misplaced items, the whispers. And then the final entry scrawled in a frantic hand. "She blames me. She hates me. She wants me to suffer." The ink smeared as if Anna had been crying as she wrote. My blood ran cold again, but this time it was a different kind of chill. Not just fear, but a profound sadness for Anna and a dawning understanding of Alina's plight. She wasn't malevolent, not truly. She was a lost, lonely child desperate for attention, for connection, and perhaps for some twisted form of comfort. She was still trying to play with her mother to be heard. I showed the diary to Mark. He read it in silence, his face growing more grim with each page. "This is heartbreaking," he said finally, "and terrifying." We realized then that Alina wasn't just a benign presence. She was confused, perhaps even angry. Her games were escalating. The next night, the pictures on our walls began to tilt, one by one. Our bedside lamp flickered violently, then exploded, plunging us into darkness. We heard the distinct sound of a child's laughter, a chilling, high-pitched giggle that seemed to echo from every corner of the room. We knew we couldn't live like this. We loved the house, but we couldn't ignore the escalating supernatural activity. We called a paranormal investigator, a kind but skeptical woman named Dr. ELARA REID 50, who specialized in historical hauntings. She brought her equipment, her cameras, her EMF detectors. Dr. Reed spent 2 days in the house. She detected significant electromagnetic fluctuations, cold spots that registered on her thermal imaging camera, and even captured faint audio recordings that sounded like a child's voice. She was intrigued, but cautious. She didn't jump to conclusions, but she couldn't deny the evidence. On the second evening, Dr. Reed suggested we try to communicate. She set up a spirit box, a device that scans radio frequencies, theorizing that spirits could manipulate the white noise to form words. Mark and I sat in the living room with her, the air thick with anticipation. "Alina," Dr. Reed began, her voice calm and steady, "we know you're here. We want to help you. Can you tell us what you need?" The spirit box crackled. Then a distorted voice, unmistakably a child's, cut through the static. "Mama." My heart leaped into my throat. Mark grabbed my hand, his grip tight. "Is your mama here, Alina?" Dr. Reed asked gently. "Gone," the voice whispered. "Alone." A wave of profound sadness washed over me. This poor child, trapped for over a century, still searching for her mother. "We are here, Alina," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "We want to help you find peace." The spirit box crackled again. "Play," it said then, music. Dr. Reed looked at us. "She wants to play, she wants music." We thought about the music box, the one that had played by itself. We found it and wound it up. As the gentle tune filled the room, the temperature seemed to rise slightly. The oppressive feeling in the house lessened. "Do you like the music, Alina?" I asked. A faint whisper, clearer this time. "Yes." That night we heard no footsteps, no whispers. The house felt lighter, less oppressive. We continued to play music for Alina, old-fashioned melodies that we found online. We even bought a new music box, one that played a lullaby. Dr. Reed explained that Alina wasn't malevolent. She was just lonely and scared. She had been left alone after her mother died, and her spirit had become attached to the house, waiting. Anna's diary suggested that Alina might have felt her mother was abandoning her, leading to a lingering resentment. But the mama on the spirit box confirmed her deepest longing was for her mother. We decided to hold a small, private ceremony, a dedication to Alina and her mother. We invited a local historian, Mr. JNKINS 68, who had researched the Vance family, and a compassionate medium, MS, Anna Mari 55, recommended by Dr. Reed. We placed photographs of Alina and Anna that Mr. Jenkins had found in his archives on the mantelpiece. We played Alina's favorite lullaby. Ms. Anna Marie entered a meditative state, her eyes closed. She spoke softly, describing a young girl, shy at first, then slowly revealing her presence. "She is here," Ms. Anna Marie whispered, her voice serene. "She feels the love. She feels remembered." Then Ms. Anna Marie's voice shifted, taking on a different cadence, a different tone. "Alina's mama is here too," she said, her eyes still closed. "She has been watching. She has been waiting for her daughter to forgive her, to understand." A sudden strong gust of wind swept through the room, even though all the windows were closed. The flames of the candles we had lit flickered wildly, then steadied. A sweet, floral scent, like honeysuckle, filled the air, a scent I remembered reading about in Anna's diary, her favorite flower. "Anna says she never blamed you, Alina," Ms. Anna Marie said, her voice filled with gentle conviction. "She loved you with all her heart. She tried to save you, and she has been waiting for you, longing for you all this time." A profound stillness descended upon the room. It was a peaceful stillness, not the heavy, watchful silence we had become accustomed to. We all felt it, a release, a sense of resolution. "They are together now," Ms. Anna Marie said, opening her eyes, tears glistening. "They are at peace." From that day forward, the cold spots were gone. The whispers ceased. The strange occurrences vanished. The house still creaked and groaned, an old house's natural symphony, but it no longer felt haunted. It felt like home. Mark and I eventually had children of our own, a son and a daughter. Our daughter, Lily, inherited my love for music. We kept the music box on the mantelpiece, and sometimes, late at night, I'd swear I'd hear a faint, distant melody, a lullaby played by an unseen hand. It wasn't scary anymore. It was a gentle reminder, a whisper from the past of a little girl and her mother, finally at peace, together in the quiet corners of our beloved home. Story the end. Story number 4. It was about 2 years ago. I was 22. My parents, bless their hearts, decided to go on a week-long cruise to the Caribbean. They usually never left me alone for more than a night or two, but this was a special anniversary trip. They kept saying, "Anna, you're an adult now. You can handle the house." And I believed them. I really did. I mean, what could go wrong? It was our house, the one I grew up in, a perfectly normal suburban home in Willow Creek. Brick 2 stories, a little porch swing. Nothing out of the ordinary. The first couple of days were fine. Glorious even. I had the whole place to myself. I watched bad movies, ate ice cream for dinner, left my clothes wherever I wanted. The freedom was exhilarating. I even enjoyed the quiet at night. It was a comforting kind of silence, the kind that lets you hear the crickets outside and the hum of the refrigerator. Then came Wednesday. I remember it vividly. I was in the kitchen making myself a ridiculously oversized sandwich, a true home alone privilege. The house was bathed in the warm, late afternoon glow of the sun. Suddenly, I heard it, a faint creak from upstairs. I froze. My hand, holding a slice of tomato, stopped midair. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noises. Our house was built in the 70s, so not ancient, but old enough to have its quirks. I shrugged it off, finished my sandwich, and went into the living room to watch TV. Later that evening, as darkness fell, the sound started again. This time, it wasn't just a creak. It was a distinct thud, like something heavy had been dropped. It came from my parents' bedroom, directly above the living room. My heart started to pound. I turned down the TV, straining my ears. Nothing, just the normal house sounds. The refrigerator humming in the distance, the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, playing tricks on me because I was alone. Maybe a branch hitting the roof. I got up, walked to the bottom of the stairs, and looked up into the dim hallway. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding ridiculously small in the sudden silence. No answer. Of course not, it was just me. I went back to the couch, but I couldn't relax. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every little rustle of the leaves outside sounded like footsteps. I tried to focus on the TV, but my mind kept replaying the thud. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, listening to every sound. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. A low, guttural moan. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, and it was coming from inside the house. My blood ran cold. I pulled the covers tighter, my eyes darting around the dark room. My bedside lamp was on, casting a small circle of light, but the corners of the room felt like they were swallowing the shadows whole. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to believe it was a dream. But the moan came again, a little closer this time. It sounded like it was coming from the hallway, just outside my door. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to call out, but my throat was tight with fear. I listened, my ears straining in the oppressive silence. And then I heard it. A soft scratching sound like fingernails dragging across wood. It was coming from my bedroom door. I whimpered, burying my face in my pillow. This couldn't be real. There was no one else in the house. I had locked all the doors and windows. I was sure of it. I checked them meticulously before bed, just like my dad always did. The scratching stopped. I slowly lifted my head, my eyes wide and unblinking in the semi-darkness. A moment of silence, then a soft click. The doorknob. It was turning. I gasped, a small, choked sound. The doorknob slowly, agonizingly turned. My door, which I had definitely closed and latched, began to creak open. Just a sliver at first, a sliver of inky blackness. Then, slowly, wider. I could see nothing in the opening, just more darkness, but I felt something. A cold, heavy presence. A feeling of intense dread that seeped into my bones. I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to even breathe properly. I stared at the opening, waiting for something to appear, for some monstrous figure to step into my room. But nothing did, just the darkness and the cold. It was an unnatural cold, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand on end even in a warm room. After what felt like an eternity, the door slowly, silently, swung shut again. The click of the latch echoed in the terrifying silence. I lay there for a long time, trembling, staring at the closed door. I didn't dare get up. I didn't dare turn off the lamp. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, I was a wreck. My eyes were bloodshot, my nerves frayed. I went downstairs, trying to convince myself that it had all been a nightmare. A vivid, terrifying nightmare brought on by being alone. As I made coffee, I noticed something. The small, framed photo of my parents and me on the kitchen counter. It had been moved. It was facing the wall. I always kept it facing outwards. A small thing, but it sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I checked the doors and windows again, all still locked. My parents had an old alarm system, but they rarely set it when they were home. I had considered setting it, but then decided against it. I didn't want to accidentally trip it in the middle of the night. Now, I deeply regretted that decision. Throughout the day, I tried to keep busy to distract myself. I cleaned the house, did laundry, even attempted to bake cookies. But every shadow, every creak made me jump. I felt like I was being watched, a constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck. That evening, I decided I couldn't spend another night in that house alone. I called my best friend, Chloe, and tearfully explained everything. She, being the practical one, tried to rationalize it. Anna, it's just your imagination. You're alone, you're probably just spooking yourself. But she heard the tremor in my voice, the genuine terror. She agreed to come over and stay with me. I felt a surge of relief, knowing someone else would be there, that I wouldn't be alone with whatever was in this house, was a huge comfort. Chloe arrived around 7 p.m., bringing with her a giant pizza and a bag full of cheesy horror movies, hopping to lighten the mood. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and trying to forget about the previous night. Chloe even made fun of my photo-facing-the-wall paranoia. "Anna, maybe it just fell and you put it back without thinking." I wanted to believe her. Around 11 p.m., we decided to call it a night. Chloe took the guest bedroom, and I, still feeling a bit wary, opted to keep my lamp on. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard it again. The moaning. This time it was louder, and it sounded like it was coming from the guest bedroom, Chloe's room. My eyes shot open. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. I wanted to call out Chloe's name, but my voice wouldn't come. I heard a muffled cry from her room, followed by a loud thump. Panic seized me. I scrambled out of bed, my legs trembling, and stumbled towards her door. I pushed it open, my breath catching in my throat. Chloe was sitting up in bed, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. The lamp on her bedside table was knocked over, and a book lay on the floor next to it. "Anna," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Did you hear that?" "The moaning?" I asked, my voice shaking. "And the thud?" She nodded, her eyes darting around the room. "And the scratching on the wall by my head." My blood ran cold. The scratching, just like on my door the night before. Something moved the book," she whispered, pointing a trembling finger at the floor. "It just slid off the table like someone pushed it." We stared at each other, the reality of the situation sinking in. This wasn't my imagination. This wasn't an old house settling. This was real. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice finally finding some strength. Chloe nodded frantically. We scrambled to get dressed, our movements clumsy with fear. As we were about to leave her room, we heard it again. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. It was coming from downstairs. We froze, clutching each other. We could hear footsteps now. Heavy, dragging footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow, deliberate. My mind raced. We couldn't go downstairs. We were trapped. "The window," Chloe whispered, pointing to the window in her room. It was a standard double-hung window, not too high off the ground. "It's too high," I whispered back, fear making my voice tight. "We'll break something." The footsteps were getting closer. They were on the landing now. We could hear the rhythmic creak of each step. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house, like someone had slammed a door shut with immense force. It came from my parents' bedroom. We both jumped, stifling screams. The footsteps paused. Then they resumed, but this time they were faster, more urgent. Like whatever it was coming for us. We had no choice. We threw open the window. The cool night air rushed in. I climbed out first, my hands gripping the windowsill, my feet searching for purchase. Chloe quickly followed. We landed awkwardly on the soft grass, scrambling to our feet. We didn't look back. We just ran across the lawn towards Chloe's car, which was parked at the curb. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the doors. We piled in, locking the doors behind us with a satisfying click. Chloe started the car, the engine roaring to life. As she pulled away, I glanced back at my house. The lights were off, but in the dim moonlight I could see something in the upstairs window. A dark silhouette. It was watching us. A cold, undeniable dread settled over me. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't the house settling. Something was in there, something that had been waiting. We drove straight to Chloe's apartment, and I didn't return to my house until my parents were back from their trip. I never told them the full extent of what happened. I just said I got a little spooked being alone and Chloe came to stay. They laughed it off, told me I was still a big baby. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I still get chills whenever I think about that silhouette in the window watching us leave. I haven't been able to sleep in that house alone since. Every creak, every shadow, every unexpected sound sends me spiraling back to that terrifying week. I often wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run. What would have happened if we had stayed? Story the end.